Good evening and welcome to my discussion of business ethics. My name is Christopher Akers. This is for the capstone class through Rogers State University as instructed by Professor Kinnemer. We're going to look at business ethics this evening. We're going to focus on three specific points. Firstly, we're going to look at ethics as a philosophy, look at some of the historical context, the etymology of the word and things of that nature. We're going to proceed from that point to ethics as they apply to business and corporations. And finally, we're going to compare and contrast some ethical decisions made by corporations and individuals alike and look at those from an ethical perspective as well. Let's look at ethics historically. The etymology of the word ethics is interesting. It comes from the Greek, actually, the Greek word ethos specifically, which means to come from one's inner character or one's inner self. Ethics was a big issue for Greek philosophers. Socrates was among the most famous of Greek philosophers. He is actually held by some to be the inventor of ethics. He took from his teacher, improved upon it, and made it an actual, what we might call scientific study, which his student Plato then took on as well. Centuries later, after Greek philosophers, men like Immanuel Kant and Thomas Hobbes are still struggling with the concept of ethics, still struggling to define and understand ethics. Ethics is not easily defined. The few definitions that we have, Webster's Collegiate Dictionary identifies ethics as a theory system of moral values. The Art of Leadership, authored by Curtis and Manning, identifies ethics as the study of moral judgments and right and wrong conduct. And Business Ethics by Manuel G. Velasquez identifies ethics as the standards that a group has about what is right and wrong. Morality has come up a couple times in these definitions. So let's take a look at that. Morality is, in fact, the foundation upon which the study of ethics rests. Morality is, of course, the idea of what is right and wrong, what is bad or good, evil or good. And some systems of ethics and morality focus on the internal, such as hedonism. Hedonism is the idea of pleasure above all else. Pleasure is the primary source of good, whereas other ethical systems, such as the Judeo-Christian religion, find their moral and ethical directives from outside sources. For example, prophets speaking from the Christian God would deliver ethical and moral directives to the people directly. Ethical studies and ethical searches have primarily focused on the individual. That has been the primary focus of the writings and things of that nature that we see on ethics. That is until recently. Business ethics has become a much more prominent issue, especially with recent business scandals such as Enron and Halliburton and things like that. Business and Society, written by Anne Lawrence, James Weber, and James Post, defines business ethics as the application of general ethical ideas to business behavior. So it can be said that what holds true for the individual with respect to right and wrong conduct, right and wrong behavior, can also hold true in a corporate sense as well. Most often, with respect to ethical conduct within businesses, the ethical concept that we find applied to business is that of responsibility. Now we see that in concepts such as employee welfare, including child labor laws and discrimination laws, OSHA, employee protection, things like that. We also see corporate citizenship, which is the concept of businesses giving back to their communities, helping with low-income loans and that sort of thing, helping with their community's infrastructure. And possibly the most verbalized issue of corporate responsibility is that of environmental responsibility. We hear quite a few things about pollution, air pollution, water pollution, and that sort of thing, and also sustainability, which has become something of a buzzword in recent years. That is the idea that businesses take no more resources than can be naturally replenished over a course of time. We're going to look now at a few decisions that were faced by some organizations, and we're going to compare and contrast those. we're going to look specifically at National Semiconductor and at Johnson & Johnson. Now, many years ago, National Semiconductor was contracted by the Department of Defense to provide them with various pieces of equipment, primarily computer chips and things of that nature. There was a missile scare. There was in the NORAD base in Colorado, 2 missiles showed up coming from Russia, and then 22 missiles, 222 missiles, and it progressed from there. At that point, computer technicians knew there was something wrong. After testing, they figured out that these chips were faulty. Now, it progressed to find out that the parts that National Semiconductor provided for the Department of Defense were improperly tested. And in point of fact, records were falsified to help perpetrate the fraud of the improper testing. Now let's compare this course of action with Johnson & Johnson. You might recall the Tylenol scare of the early 1980s, where as many as 7 people died from cyanide poisoning. Now, it was never conclusively proved at this particular point in time whether this was due to the way Johnson & Johnson had processed the Tylenol, or whether this was something that the Tylenol came in contact with after it left Johnson & Johnson's care. Johnson & Johnson's response to this was to immediately pull Tylenol from the shelves, with no focus on fault, no focus on culpability. Their focus was the protection of their customers, the protection of their consumers, regardless of how this may have affected their bottom line. Now, this doesn't jive with National Semiconductor. National Semiconductor chose to protect their investment, to protect their bottom line. Johnson & Johnson chose to protect their customers, chose to protect their communities. Who made the ethical decision? In my personal opinion, the ethical and correct decision was Johnson & Johnson. There can be no question about that in my mind. Let's move from organizational ethics to personal ethics in an organizational setting. We're going to look specifically at Kermit Van Divier and Sharon Watkins. Kermit Van Divier was an interesting case. He was told by his superiors at B.F. Goodrich to falsify reports for aircraft brakes that they were testing. Now, these brakes repeatedly failed tests, but Kermit Van Divier was told to falsify the reports and pass them anyway, pass them regardless. Van Divier's decision was to go ahead and falsify the reports and pass these brakes along. His reasoning was that bills aren't paid with personal satisfaction, meaning that he might have the personal satisfaction of knowing he'd made the right choice, but if he was fired or if he had resigned, he wouldn't be able to pay his bills. Let's compare him to Sharon Watkins. Now, this is a name that's been in the news quite a bit. She was the whistleblower at the Enron Corporation. Now, regardless of her potential loss of career and her potential loss of income, Miss Watkins proceeded with what she knew to be correct. She proceeded with what she felt was the ethical and correct choice, even though it might have cost her her job. Now, does that match up with what happened with Kermit? It doesn't. Kermit chose to protect his personal investments, his mortgage, his home, paying his bills. Sharon Watkins was nearly fired and her computer was nearly seized. It's completely different. Sharon Watkins pursued what she felt was the correct and ethical decision, even though it meant a potential loss for her. What can we get from all this? Ultimately, ethics, morality, right and wrong conduct is a personal choice. Now, both organizations and individuals are given choices. There's always a choice to be made, even if your organization as a whole makes an unethical decision, the individual still has the choice to participate or not. Consequences, however, shouldn't dictate our choices. Our choices should be based on our personal, moral, ethical values. Thank you very much.